What is going on, guys? I'm not sure what to call this exactly, but I want to go over momentum in Rocket League and in tournaments in general for the Rocket League scene and see maybe how we could fix this, some type of format change. But I want to go over this one comment by the Big Bear. I was supposed to do this like a month ago, as you can see. I said I was going to do it in a week. It did not happen. But he said, Gibbs, you covered it in a bit in the vid, but I'd love to hear you and the rest of the RLCS commentators talk about the end of the tourney setup in the next broadcast. As a point of reference, the champion has come out of the losers bracket 4 out of 6 seasons. On top of that, the losers bracket champion played in the losers semifinal in 5 of the 6 seasons. In other words, the team that loses the winners final has only ever won the lower final once. That combined with other evidence, I can't read today, like the number 1 seed you bring up in early rounds, pretty much proves the biggest advantage in land is coming into a series warm with momentum. So why is the winners final played before the lower semi? It makes little sense to begin with, but given the evidence we've seen through 6 lands, it makes no sense. Puts the teams coming out of the winners bracket at a huge disadvantage going into the grand final. I think he means because there's really no warm-up time and you've played so long ago while the other team has played a lot recently. It also puts the team dropping from the winners final to the losers final at a disadvantage. Seems like a simple thing like flipping the order of the lower semi, winners final, lower final, then grand final could help mitigate some of these issues. So the first thing that I want to point out is seasons 1 through 4 of RLCS did exactly that. Had the upper final, then immediately played the lower final, and then you go on to the grand final. The reason why I think they got away from that, a lot of players did not like to play immediately right after they lost. They felt like that was more of a disadvantage. And I was always on the side with you where I'm like, I think that's like still a better take of like, hey, I just played on stage. I get to play on stage again. But a lot of players, one in particular that I remember was NRG back in Season 3, they really didn't like to play right after losing. It was... some of it was with some of the stage issues where they had to stay on stage, even though there was, there's still a hefty 20 to 25 minute break between series. But they didn't really like that. So I think that's why they changed it. And it was actually after Method actually won for the first time that lower final where they played back to back that they did go on and switch that. Now, Gnarly has had this too. I think Gnarly won. Now I'm not positive. I couldn't find the VOD, followed seasons 1 through 4. And PSG came back and won that series. So PSG, they bounced back as well. So we do say, 4 out of 6 or whatever, and only one time out of that. But there is other tournaments where it has happened. And again, it's a small sample size. So I wouldn't really worry too much about that. But going back to the comment itself, we did change it from that particular way because teams didn't like to play back-to-back right after they lost. And again, I personally think if you're winning and you play back-to-back, that's a bigger advantage than if you're losing and you play back-to-back. I think I would rather do that than have a team come up at me after just winning a series and after I've had a little bit of a break. I personally would rather play back-to-back. Now, of course, it's hard to bounce back. Either way, it's hard to bounce back from a lower final, and we have seen that through a lot of these tournaments. But let's go back through and see why maybe this happened. Now, I do think that momentum is a big deal, but at some point, players have to overcome momentum at some point. So let's go back through. So I wanted to go through the seasons. I have the Liquipedia open here. So let's go back through the very first season. First season, honestly, I think you could put it as like Flipside was a better team than Northern. They also just made that run. Like Flipside had an incredible run and they were playing out of their minds. You could say maybe Northern had a relatively weak bracket leading up to it where they played Genesis, who was pretty much a walkover. And then they played Exodus, who didn't look that good. And Flipside also 3-0'd them. So it's hard to tell exactly. Maybe Northern kind of just fell down and that they weren't, that momentum did kill them versus Flipside. But in this case, in my opinion at least, I think Flipside probably had a better case of being the better team, maybe. It was close between these two, but definitely in this tournament, I think Flipside was playing better. But, this is one of those cases where I could see it, where momentum probably killed Northern Gaming, where they had to bounce back right after a loss, and they couldn't do it. And we'll see that theme a lot with Remco going forward. But let's go to season number 2. Season number 2, I don't think there is a case for that, really, at all. Flipside was the huge favorites coming into this tournament. And Maka took him down 3-1. Then Maka had a super close series versus Northern Gaming. But people are going to lose series here or there. Like, I don't think a Maka 3-1 versus a Maka 4-3 in Northern shows that Northern was the better team. Flip side was heavy favorites coming into this tournament. So it's not a surprise to see Flipside take down Northern in this style. But again, like, they have to make those runs. They have to take out really good teams. They have to take out NRG. And every time we talk about, like the lower bracket team has a huge advantage, well, it's also only 1 out of the 8 or whatever get that advantage. Everyone else is just eliminated. But in this case, I don't think it was really momentum. I think it was just Flipside's a better team in this case for season number 2. Let's go to season number 3, and we'll continue this trend. Season number 3, we had Northern making the incredible run. And I think this one could be slightly momentum-based, and I think that this was the one that Energy was complaining about, where they had a really close series versus Mocket, and then they kind of just fell apart versus Northern Gaming. This one, probably a little bit more momentum-based, but again, you have to play your bracket, you know? You just have to play it out a certain way. Now, like Energy, they obviously took out Northern Gaming 3-0 on day number 1. They looked a lot better that day. But again, Northern was playing better on this final day. The hard part is when you're in the upper final, you only play one match. You play the winner's final, and if you lose that, you go down. And so on the day, you're not looking that good, generally speaking, anyway, because you've only played one match and you've lost it. But this one, again, I could see some momentum questions being answered. But again, like, I don't think it solves anything by changing the format, because in this case, it was Energy played back-to-back, and that obviously didn't help them here either. And I think if it was the other way around, where Energy had a little bit of a break, and Northern just came off a 3-0, I think Northern still wins that series. It's just, there is momentum in Rocket League, but again, players have to find a way to bounce back, and it has happened before, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So, season number 4 was the last season of the back-to-back upper final to the lower finals. So, Method had to bounce back. They began versus Cloud9, losing 2 of those series, or 2 of the games in a row, and then they won 4 straight. But this was the one that I hate when people brought this up between season 4 and season 5, where they talked about teams being tired and all this bullshit, which we've obviously seen in season 5 and season 6, that you need to find a way to play through this tiredness, and teams have easily done that. But everyone, and literally everyone, would always come up to me or talk about, well, Method, it was unfair because they had to play 3 series in a row, because they lost 4-3 and then lost a 4-0. Like, if this was any other result, no one would be talking about that at all. But because it was a 4-0, even though all the games were 1-goal games except for one, that's the reason why Method lost. And I think that was always bullshit. And I get it. You're playing a lot of Rocket League, and it is a little bit tiring, but that doesn't mean you lost 4-3 to 4-0. It's not because of that. It's just Gale Force was playing better. It's that simple. But this one always really irked me, because I think this is why it changed too, because they wanted to give the upper final teams a little bit more of an advantage with tiredness, with no breaks. So I think this was one of the reasons why it got changed. And ever since then, we've only seen the teams that have to make the longer runs out of the lower bracket win. So it doesn't really matter, it seems, about the whole tiredness stuff. Now, again, small sample size, that could change. And teams have said, yeah, sure, like, it is tiring, but you're playing Rocket League, and that's your job, and that's what you have to do. Simple as that. We'll go on to season number 5. So season number 5, well, let's go back here. Like, Method was playing really well here, and obviously momentum. They stopped the momentum of Cloud9. Cloud9 had very close series as well throughout their lower bracket run. It wasn't easy for them. They beat Chiefs 3-1, which was an extremely close series, though. Cloud9 versus Ghost, extremely close. And Cloud9 versus G2, extremely close. So Cloud9 maybe wasn't looking that great in their lower bracket run compared to maybe some of the other teams. Maybe they weren't riding that momentum as well. But it could just be they just weren't looking as good. So that's why Method could beat them. Season number 5. We'll go back, and this was like, obviously Dignitas was the favorites to win this, and they got bounced early, and they made a run, and it's pretty much that simple. This was the first season where Complexity got a little bit of a break, and they probably needed it after getting smacked 4-0, but I don't think anyone was going to bet that Complexity would win that series, but Dignitas came through and won that series. And then also talking about bracket resets, where like are they needed? And I think it shows. One, I think it's always fair to do the bracket reset. If you are going to have an entire tournament like in a certain format, you shouldn't change it for the grand final. And also, it gave us the hypest series we've ever seen in Rocket League to date by far, that 4-3 where Energy almost came back from going down in that bracket reset, but they could not prevail. But we see here Dignitas taking that. And again, bracket resets have been a thing back in season number 3, or I'm sorry, Northern Gaming 4-2, but another 4-3, so it was closer with Makita U. And Flipside kind of just trashed Makita U the season before that. But moving on, so here, I don't think it was necessarily momentum. Like, Dig was just trashing people. Simple as that. 3-0, 3-0, 4-2. Like, Dignitas was the best team in the world. That's the reason why they won it. I don't think it was necessarily because of the momentum necessarily, but I just think Dig was a much stronger team. Moving on to season number 6. Season number 6 just happened. Cloud9 making that run. And now this one, you could say, a little bit of momentum, but at the same time, like, Weedham Girls get trashed 4-1 by Dignitas. Even if they played right after that, who knows what would happen. Cloud9 obviously was on another level when they were playing in the final day. It was a lot different from what we saw previously. So I think, honestly, Cloud9 was just looking better. And it kind of shows when they took down Dignitas 4-1 that Cloud9 was looking better on the day. I don't think momentum really necessarily did anything for that. I think they were just looking better. Pretty simple there. But going over to Gnarly, so here's where we see a little bit different, where it was Cloud9 PSG. PSG took out Gale Force and all that stuff. PSG took out Energy, and we got a similar result. So this one, the momentum didn't matter for NRG. They tried to run it through. PSG comes back and beats them. And also, Gnarly one had the first where someone got bracket reset, but then the other team came back and won. Cloud9 won that series. So that was what, the third bracket reset, or fourth, I guess I should say. Fourth one, and this was the first time that a team won. 2 other times, though, they improved and brought it to Game 7. The only times it wasn't was, what, Flipside? I'm sorry, it was the 5th one. Flipside, where they 4-1, and Cloud9 when they 4-1 in the last season. Then we have Gnarly 2, and a similar story of how, like, the lower bracket team was probably the better team was NRG, that they were known as the second best team in the world. And flip side, they did make their run through. They did take down Cloud9, but Energy showed why they were the second best team in the world at this time, and this was right after season number 5. So Energy takes down Flipside 4-1. Again, I don't think it had a ton to do with momentum, but there is always momentum on the line. But there's no easy answer for that. There really isn't. You just have to play it out. Like I had X Games up here, but this was just a single limb bracket, and this was like you made it through a double limb, like very similar to E-League, and then you come through. And this time we had both of the top teams actually win. And then we saw at E-League where it's like there are some other formats that you could do. It's hard to do in a 3-day event with 10 teams, but you could do something similar to E-League where you just bring people through in the lower bracket or the upper bracket and then go single limb. But then you have it be a little bit unfair possibly where we saw at E-League both of the teams that actually lost in their group, they beat the winners of the opposite group, and then they played off to win. So we had 4 teams all with 1 loss at one point, but 2 of them were in the finals. 2 of them were going home. Now, I don't really mind that necessarily. It's just whatever format there is, you just have to play that format because you get the benefit of playing the worst team from that group. And there's obviously going to be teams that improve on certain days and all of that. But you can't really get rid of any of that momentum stuff because it's like at some point it's going to happen. Like, what if you play in the second semifinal versus playing in the first semifinal? Well, then that team's going to have more momentum going into the finals. At some point, you just have to play what's in front of you, and you have to deal with it. It's pretty much that simple. And sure, we've seen, 1 out of 6. What was the comment? That the lower bracket champion has come from the lower semifinal in 5 of the 6 seasons. What we saw also, like Gnarly, that didn't necessarily happen in one of those seasons. So it's like Small sample size, to be fair. And then also, sometimes it's just the better teams. Like, the better teams are coming out of there. I would say probably like 2 instances where it was probably definitely momentum, or at least more heavily influenced compared to just the better team. But there's not much you can do, and by just flip-flopping a few series, it's not really going to change much, because you go from momentum from the lower bracket teams winning all the time and just playing back-to-back-to-back and just keep that streak going, to a team that just lost having to play and having to regroup immediately, which is, like, pick your poison there. Like, what would you rather? Like, would you rather play back-to-back but be kind of on a downer, or would you rather have a little bit of break but this other team's on a super high and they're running through their bracket? Personally, I would like to play back-to-back, but, like, there is no right answer there. It's that simple. And we'll see. When Sam comes in, I assume we're going to have to change format somehow. So we'll see if that changes. I assume we will go to some type of single elim bracket towards the end of the tournament, just because if you want to fit all these games in or fit all these teams in, it's just the way it's going to have to be. The only thing I wish from these formats is just don't do the 4-man group things with double elim, because rematches suck. Rematches blow. And I get that rematches will probably happen later in a tournament, and that's more allowed, because it's like, all right, these teams were destined to play again. They battled through. They beat all these other teams. But when it's only 4 teams in a group, and the odds are 2 and 3 in that group are going to play each other twice, it's just the way it is, like what Weedham Girls and Flipside did. There's ways to avoid that, and simply being just pair 2 groups. You have Group 1A and Group 1B, and then flip the lower brackets. So then they don't wind up playing each other again, and you'll definitely make sure that you get the best, or potentially the best 4 teams out of those 8, instead of just getting the best 2 out of 4 in 2 different sets of 4, if that makes sense. Where it's more accurate to try and collect the best 4 from 8 than 2 and 4, 2 and 4, because you could easily have 3 of those teams from group number 1 be better than group number 2's like second best team. So that's what I would like to see. Like, some of those things change, but all in all, like, I think there is momentum going into some of these series for sure. But at the same time, these players are professionals. They know what's in front of them, and you just have to play it out. Like, there's no other way to do it. With 10 teams, unless we went to like a weak format, like, this is how it would have to be, where we would have to have, like, hey, it's a double elimination bracket, and the lower bracket teams, they have a slight advantage of momentum. You still have to beat a team twice, or you still have to survive the lower bracket. And I think that's the thing that everyone always, like, kind of forgets, is, like, only one of those teams gets to come out of that lower bracket. Everyone else goes home, so we don't talk about them. And sure, maybe, like, if you want to win the tournament, maybe it's actually a better idea to go to the lower bracket. Maybe, but I don't see any team signing up for that to take that chance. That is for sure. I don't think Cloud9 wanted to sign up and go to lower bracket round number 1 at the World Championship. That is for sure. But I don't really know what this conversation's about. I felt like talking about it. If you guys have any comments about momentum, about formats, about any of that, please, 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 please post in the comments. I love talking about formats. I talk to Cyanox all the time about formats because I'm very passionate about all of that stuff. So definitely type some words in. Hopefully Big Bear sees this, even though it's a little bit late. But I just wanted to make a video about that. And everyone have a Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year. I probably won't have too many new things coming out for the rest of the year. But I hope everyone has a safe holiday and safe travels and a Happy New Year. And I will see you guys in 2019, where we will have lots of Rocket League events. And hopefully I'm at a lot of them. I don't know necessarily how many of these I'll be at. I'll probably definitely be there for RLCS. Besides that, who knows? I'm hoping to be at as many as I can. But that'll do it for me, guys. And again, wish you all safe, happy holiday and a happy new year. And I'll see you in 2019. Bye.